Well, the month of March is Women's History Month, and honestly, I truly would not have known this until the CBS channel showed commercials featuring some of the unknown women of history, whose names I still don't remember. So this last Sunday of March, we're taking a look at one of the great unnamed women in Jesus' life. Because there were two dinners during Holy Week. The one we talk about most, of course, is the Passover meal that Christians call the Last Supper. But 2 days before that meal, in the Jerusalem suburb of Bethany, Jesus attended a meal hosted by Simon the leper. And that was an unfortunate nickname that stuck even after Simon was cured of whatever skin disease ailed him. But Bethany was the one place where Jesus truly had friends. He didn't have to be on all the time. He didn't have to be the rabbi, the teacher, the healer, the living presence of God. Jesus could allow himself to be vulnerable. And he could allow those in Bethany to be his friend, the kinds of friends where he could say out loud what he was really thinking. And the people at the meal were the kind of friends who could see Jesus as just a regular guy, as well as their rabbi. And the people at the meal were special because they could let Jesus be incredibly human. At the same time, they saw him as someone who was incredibly close to God. As a result, they probably heard a lot more of Jesus' teachings than the majority, because he could speak so freely about his experience of God and his hope for God's people. Now, during the meal, an unnamed woman approached Jesus as he was reclining and eating at the table. And the woman was carrying a very expensive alabaster jar containing what we would now call an essential oil from nard. Now, nard plants grow in the Himalayas, which is a long distance from Israel, from Bethany. So a jar of nard oil would have cost that woman the equivalent of today's $6,000. That was a lot of money then, and it's a lot of money now. Which means this unnamed woman was probably one of the women that supported Jesus' ministry. And she was probably often a guest of Mary and Martha and Lazarus when Jesus stayed at their house. And like Mary, she really knew who Jesus was. And based on everything that happened later that week, it was probably the women of Bethany who knew who Jesus really was. Well, this unnamed woman risked entering a party to which she had not been invited, and she walked right up to Jesus, broke open this expensive jar of nard, and anointed his head, poured it on his head. And Jesus said she was preparing him for his burial. But the woman did more than that. This unnamed woman announced to all who were gathered there that she believed that Jesus was going to be killed that week, and she also believed that Jesus was her king, her Messiah, her Christ. Now, most of the people at the meal, including Jesus' closest followers, did not really believe in their hearts that Jesus was going to be killed that week. They didn't really understand who Jesus was. Now, they got glimpses of who Jesus was, and every once in a while they were able to spout out like Peter did, "You are the Lord, you are the Messiah, you're the Son of the living God." But then they would revert back. And the whole idea of Jesus being killed and raised back to life was something most of them just did not want to comprehend. They knew in their heads who Jesus was, but their hearts told them a different story. They knew, but they were afraid, and out of their fear, they didn't really believe. This unnamed woman, therefore, totally unnerved those at the meal. She unnerved them with the cost of the nard oil. At least that's what they could say out loud. They knew the oil was expensive. They could say that it could have fed many people, and they thought that this woman was being needlessly extravagant. But what the people at the meal did not say was that they were afraid, and therefore they did not want to believe that Jesus was going to be killed. They were afraid, and they did not want to believe that Jesus was going to suffer and die and be raised the next day. They were frightened by that possibility. They were afraid that they would be arrested and they would be killed just because they were an associate of Jesus. Yet the unnamed woman found the courage to risk confronting their fear by anointing Jesus as her king. She found the courage to believe that Jesus was the Messiah who would be killed and returned to life. She found the courage to risk confronting the fears, and out of those fears, the disbelief of those who were at the meal with Jesus. And as a result, she was insulted for her actions. She was insulted because she dared to indulge Jesus with a very extravagant gift. She was humiliated and embarrassed when others had the nerve to suggest she was doing this because she did not care for the poor. She was attacked because she dared to confront their fears with her beliefs and her truth. It's akin to people today not liking what we're saying or believing and saying, well, you're not a very good Christian. Kind of stings, doesn't it? Kind of stings. And this woman was being stung when she was being told she had done the wrong thing by caring for Jesus, that she could have given the money to the poor. Well, this unnamed woman reminds us following and believing in Jesus means finding the courage to risk acting on our beliefs, finding the courage to stand up and tell a story of a miracle that happened in our lives, that happened to someone in our lives, when standing up and talking in front was probably the last thing you thought about doing today. Or ever. Yeah. Following Jesus means risking insult and embarrassment from others. Following Jesus means finding the courage to take action when others do not. Following Jesus means risking being associated with him even when others wish to do us harm. Following Jesus means confronting other people's fears, even when we know doing that is going to result in attack on us. Following Jesus also means risking being unnamed. Near the end of this episode in Mark's Gospel, Jesus said, "What she has done will be told in remembrance of her." And yet, that is not the dinner Christians celebrate. The dinner we celebrate is the second dinner, the Passover, the Last Supper. Today, we even have given it the name, and we have great art celebrating that second dinner. We hold a special service every year called Maundy Thursday to remember that second dinner. The first one, not so much. So perhaps following Jesus means willing to be unnamed in spite of the money we spend, the actions we take, the embarrassments we suffer, the risks we encounter, the fears we confront, and the truths we tell to those who are afraid to admit they believe. Perhaps following Jesus means finding the courage to act with faith, truth, care, extravagance, courage, and risk, all the while knowing we'll probably be unnamed, unrecognized, unappreciated, and forgotten. I want to brag on this church a little bit. We had the funeral for Esther Schaaf yesterday, and the family was so concerned about how they were going to get a meal served. They wanted to have a dinner, but they were thinking, okay, who can we hire to be caterers? Where will we get the food? And I could say, we've got a few groups of people here in the church who are more than willing to help with this. You do? Took such a load off of their hearts and their minds. Now my guess is, I'd bet, but I'm United Methodist. My guess is most of us could name maybe 3 or 4 of the people that work in the kitchen for funerals regularly. Not all. When the guy from Festival came to deliver the food, he said, "You guys are so great. You're the best group in the city for handling funerals, because we've got a group that's willing to step up and do it." My guess is most of us maybe could name 1 or 2, maybe 3 or 4, but not everybody involved. When we follow Jesus, we risk being unnamed. We risk being forgotten. We risk being this unnamed woman whom Jesus said we will celebrate her all the time, and do we? No. In fact, usually she's been called a prostitute, she's been insulted, she's been called all sorts of things, except a woman who knew who Jesus was and was willing to name him as her king and to get him ready for his burial when nobody else wanted to admit he would even die. There are a lot of people in our lives whose names we remember because they showed us and taught us what it was like to be followers of Jesus. Yet, there are countless other people who surround us at the same time, who have taken time and energy to show us and teach us all the things we need to know about what it is to follow Jesus. And we might have known their names at one time, but we don't remember them anymore. There are congregations of people, the people that compose Lakeshore, and the congregations of people that compose Lakeshore have been served by a lot of Sunday school teachers, a lot of people working in kitchens, a lot of people taking care of the buildings, a lot of people folding letters and newsletters and bulletins, a lot of people caring for the buildings and grounds, as well as a whole slew of pastors. And all of these people have worked hard and sacrificed so the next generation would be able to worship and grow up as followers of Jesus. And most of us can't name even 3 of their names. Some of us here have names that might be remembered. But my guess is most of us will be like that unnamed woman at the first dinner. Remembered or not, perhaps following Jesus means risking being unnamed. Having the courage to risk taking actions that declare the truths we know and believe, regardless of how others may react. Perhaps following Jesus means doing the work that needs to be done so that the next generation will know what it means to follow Jesus, even though our names probably won't be remembered. The first dinner was perhaps as important as that second dinner. Let's celebrate the unnamed who have given us the gifts to follow Jesus for all of those generations that have brought us to this point. And let's risk being the unnamed for the next generation. Amen.